We're now being joined by Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Chinonye Obiagwu, for a legal perspective on the Supreme Court's ruling earlier today. And good to see you, and thanks for your time as always. And quickly here, a court of appeal has ordered electoral body INEC to allow the presidential candidates Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi access to inspect the sensitive materials deployed for the conduct of the presidential election. The panel of the appellate court gave the orders when it heard two separate ex parte applications the two aggrieved presidential candidates filed alongside their political parties.
Yes, indeed. Well, the respondents in the matter were INEC, the declared winner of the presidential election, Bola Ahmed Tinubu himself, as well as his party, the All Progressives Congress. Well, the Supreme Court suit between the 6 states and the Attorney General of the Federation over the presidential elections outcome has been discontinued. Lawyers to the states say this is because results have already been announced and a president-elect declared, albeit illegally and unconstitutionally. They say it will now be a tribunal matter. All right, well, the leadership of the PDP in Benue State has rejected the outcome of the presidential and National Assembly elections held in the state.
Well, the party says the process of conducting both elections in Benue State did not conform with the standards stipulated in the law for the polls.
All right, let's bring in Chinonye Obiagwu, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, to talk to us about the Supreme Court ruling. Good to have you on Newsnight tonight. Well, for the very, very first time, a court in Nigeria is telling the president that it has disobeyed the court. I wonder what you make of that, especially when the Supreme Court says the disobedience of orders of court by the president is, well, in a constitutional democracy, is a sign of the failure of the Constitution.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I think the Supreme Court decision is not based on the so-called disobedience of court's order. It was based on the fact that the president did not have sufficient consultation and proper notice as provided in Section 23 of the CBN Act. Because if there's a contempt of court, the procedure for enforcing that is completely different. It's under the Sheriff and Civil Process Act, where Form 48 and 49 were taken. But that was, the comment of the Supreme Court was, by the way, it was an obiter. The ratio of the decision was that proper consultation as permitted under Section 20, subsection 3 of CBN Act were not carried out, and therefore a fiscal policy that affects the entire nation must comply with those provisions. First, consultation and proper notice, reasonable notice, which is the word of the statute under Section 20, subsection 3. And these are the basis for the decision.
You know, we wouldn't be here talking about this if perhaps the president had some legal counsel from his advisors. We've heard Yahya Bello and some others say he was badly advised. In this place, what's the role of the AGF?
Yeah, well, this is an internal issue. The presidency. The president has a reason for giving the directives, because the statute, the CBN Act, Section 20, gives the president the powers to give directives to the CBN with respect to banknotes and legal tenders. So, if the president decides to issue those directives pursuant to his powers under Section 20, he simply needed to follow the provisions which say that he has to give adequate notice, which the Supreme Court, in their wisdom, said, well, you know, people may have their different opinions, but the Supreme Court has said such notice, reasonable notice, were not given for people, the Nigerian people, to be prepared for the consequences of the redesign of the currency. And having said that, I think the Supreme Court is gradually trying to assert itself as a policy court. And if you look at, we've not seen the full draft of the judgment, but if you listen to the tone of the justices of the Supreme Court giving the judgment, they look at other issues apart from law, issue of policy. In fact, my Lord Josaghi said this is inherent. Such consultation is inherent in a democracy. And the Supreme Court is supposed to be a policy court. So I think it's reasserting itself as a policy court, as it were.
It would be nice if you could expatiate further on what you mean by that the Supreme Court is trying to assert itself as, a policy court. And I'd also like you to explain to us, because some reports say the Supreme Court invalidated the Naira redesign policy. In this judgment, exactly what did the Supreme Court do?
The Supreme Court said that the redesign of Naira is legal within the Section 20 of the CBN Act, but that for that to happen, there need to be proper consultation, and there's supposed to be reasonable notice to the public so as to assuage the consequences of such policy. That is, the Supreme Court now said this was not done, and therefore it was illegal. It does not, meet the standard of the Constitution and standard of democratic principle, and that's the meat of the decision. And if the Supreme Court referred to the suffering of Nigeria, you see, Nigerians who could not access currency notes, who sometimes stand in banks and ATM machines for hours and hours on, then the Supreme Court is looking beyond the law to think about the social policy, the social consequences of a policy of the presidency that does not meet the standard set in the statute, which is reasonable notice to the public. So that, and on that basis, we think it was a decision more of policy than law.
You're talking about more policy and law. Many have also argued that the Supreme Court is getting into an area it shouldn't venture into. That it's a bad precedent looking at the CBN policy.
Well, as lawyers, I beg to disagree that the Supreme Court cannot go beyond technical law. I think the Supreme Court has always been encouraged, in fact, any court in Nigeria, to always look at the substantial justice. And that's why when judgments come out from courts, including Supreme Court, that deals mainly on technicalities, people begin to feel, oh man, justice is not about technicality, it's about substantial justice. Now the Supreme Court is trying to tweak towards doing substantial justice by taking a policy decision that will assuage millions of Nigerians who are suffering because of the scarcity of currency. And people are still saying they've done wrong. I think the Supreme Court itself is a balancing court, is a court in every jurisdiction, every democracy. The highest court of the land deals with both law and policy. They try to harmonize to ensure that governance is within the law and in the interest of justice and in the interest of the public. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, with all due respect to those who hold contrary opinion.
Based on the statement from the Supreme Court that all that's happened before now, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, is a sign of the failure of the Constitution, would you say that the Nigerian Constitution has failed, or is it failing, and what would it take to prop it back up? And is the Supreme Court defending Nigeria's democracy?
Yes, that's exactly what the Justice of the Supreme Court, what the Justice of the Supreme Court say they are doing to strengthen and deepen constitutional democracy. Remember, the letters of the Constitution has to be interpreted and given life by the courts. That's the role of judiciary. And if the judiciary think that even though the fiscal policy is within the exclusive legislative list of the federal government, in other words, it's only the federal government that can make law with respect to fiscal policies such as banknotes. But the court said in doing that, you must comply with the law. So I think it's a move to strengthen democracy rather than undermine it. It's a move to strengthen the application and implementation of the Constitution rather than undermining it. And that should be seen from that light. And if you look at what is going on in the country, it appears the currency redesign policy was not thought through, because people are suffering. People can't have access to the currency notes. And we're talking about not just people in the cities, people in rural areas. A lot of people do cash economy, informal sector. They carry their cash, go and buy goods, sell, resell, carry the cash, go and buy goods, sell, resell. In many communities, maybe in several local governments, you may not see just one bank. So if the policy is elitist and it focuses on people taking money to bank to exchange, it does not recognize that there are some people who don't even have access to any financial institution, in order to take advantage of such a facility. So I think it's a policy that should be thought through, proper notice given out, proper consultation given us, so that the suffering of the people, the impact, the negative impact of such policy on the population will be reduced. And that was exactly the line the Supreme Court was reasoning.
Let's see if we can close on this. The last time with the interim injunction to then ultimately work in the favor of these Nigerians you spoke of. Now, how expectant are you with this latest ruling?
Well, the court has said that, they're not undermining the power of the president or the power of CBN in acting on the directive of the president to redesign the Naira. But they are saying we need sufficient time to do that, and they have set a time frame. And I think that should be looked at from a very healthy perspective. It's more of providing an impetus for federal government to rethink the policy and roll out a strategy that will not cause pain to the Nigerian people. The intention of the policy is good and maybe desirable, maybe progressive, but its implementation and rollout may not meet the standards of our democracy, which requires proper consultation with all layers of society. And I think that is the reasoning, and it must be looked at from that perspective, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, in my own personal opinion.
All right, thank you very much, Chinonye Obiagwu, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on Newsnight.